Hello, super expanders. Welcome back. I am so excited to have today's conversation. I'm so excited to share today's guest with you. And I say this, I think I've probably said this 100 times that I had to start a podcast so that I could actually have the opportunity to speak with some of the coolest people in specifically coolest women. And today we're doing it again. We're having that conversation. So welcome, Lindsay Lekhraj. Did I do
Oh,
it?
thank you. You nailed it. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we finally get to connect.
Me too. So a little bit of context for everyone listening. Um, I have been following Lindsay for quite some time on Instagram. And, eventually I was like, I'm just going to reach out. I'm going to ask her if she will come and be on the Super Expander podcast. So here we are. So we're going to have this really real, organic conversation with you. And I'm learning everything that you're learning actually in real time, outside of the stuff that I stalked and I like the stalker tactics, the things that I know.
Yeah, I love it.
So let's just kind of go straight off the cuff. We're going to go in deep. Tell me who you are deep down inside as a person. What makes you tick?
That's such a great question. And I think it can go so many ways, right? I honestly will tell you, I spent a lot of years trying to figure that out and trying to understand from which perspective I really felt good, right? Because you can actually go into like the whole astrology scene. And I can tell you that, well, I have kind of a unique thing that I'm a quadruple Cancer. So if that tells you anything, if you're into that sort of scene, that's very much who I am in one aspect. The other thing is, I will tell you, I'm a big nerd. I'm a very big science nerd. And so actually allowing myself to kind of step into that part of me that was kind of suppressed for a long time. When I pivoted careers into epigenetics, it felt really like, oh, is this really for me? Am I over my head? And really, I'm not at all. It's actually the most home place that I've ever felt career-wise. So that's kind of a hat that I wear, right? And owning that part of my personality that was like the brainiac a little bit that I probably got teased a little for when I was a kid has actually felt really good to come back to. The other things about me, I will tell you, I'm a dog mom. So, she's a big part of my life. And I live here in Nashville with my husband, who's in the music industry. And that's just kind of in a nutshell where we've landed as of recent. It's been a wild couple of years, but we're here, and it's actually really cool because I was born and raised in the South. And so Nashville's not home, but it's kind of close to home for me. So it's been an interesting kind of energy to be back in this space.
Yeah, well, the perfect place to be too if you're in the music industry. So I have to reverse back. So I feel like this is totally why I'm so drawn to you. I'm a double Cancer. I'm not a triple, double Cancer, total science nerd. So I'm like, oh my gosh, we're like, this is like all the things that the synergies, right? So that must be why I'm so drawn to you. So how in this, we'll go on the science nerd, we'll just dive into that part. What,
Yes.
like, in college, in school, in your training and like all your studies across, is that always been an interest of yours, or has it been something that's been more in your adult life?
Honestly, always. I was like the really overzealous kid in class who always wanted to answer every question until I learned that, like, not everyone loves the kid who answers every question. But yeah, I was always very much kind of an academic, I guess. I never got into sports much or anything like that. I will say it's actually kind of interesting in hindsight because even as a child, I had some low grade, I wouldn't say illnesses, but I was not always in the best of health. I was kind of like a little sickly kid. And so a lot of times that was my thing, right? Like that's the thing that felt like, hey, this is something that I can do versus, going to play kickball and thinking like, oh, this is not my thing. So it kind of very early on in life fell into a bit of an identity that I held. And over the years, that kind of progressed into something that at any given time, I kind of either loved it or hated it or didn't want to associate with that during certain phases, of course, as you are growing up. But at the end of the day, everyone kind of knew me for being like a straight A student and a little bit of a brainiac, I guess you could say.
I love it. So you have a story, basically kind of that leads us into really talking about what it is that you do, right? You went through a pretty big healing journey. So I'd love for you to share that with us today here.
Yeah, I honestly will tell you, I've had kind of a couple of different major milestones. So I'm going to try and nutshell it a little bit, and then we can elaborate to whatever depths you want to go. But definitely, I would say a big turning point in my life, and really even in kind of identity, since we were talking about that. When I was in my late 20s, I went through some health changes, some hormonal changes, actually, that actually resulted in a huge weight gain. I gained like 90 pounds in 9 months by going on a specific birth control. So this was like early mid college, and it lasted for a couple of years. And so really, and through most of my 20s, at the end of my late 20s, I actually made a lot of lifestyle changes, and I basically lost 150 pounds. So I lost like half of my person, after a lot of years that I didn't really think it was possible. Right. So it was just kind of a very impactful kind of returning to self and like change of faith kind of situation that happened. And it actually happened very relatively quickly once the pieces were in place to allow a lifestyle change and kind of an identity shift to happen. Right. So that was a very emotional journey and definitely shaped a big part of the way that I saw myself. So I will tell you, I spent kind of the early part of my 30s really just kind of getting to know myself again, and learning how to take care of myself in a different way. And then not long after that, after the weight loss, I actually had some reconstructive surgery, and I was really strongly convinced that I just needed to have breast implants for me to look the way that I wanted to look, and feel the way that I wanted to feel. And my gosh, if they say hindsight is 2020, but I did it. And it was, I mean, I don't really honestly live my life with regrets, but it was definitely like another big turning point in my health. And this time, not for the better. So I had implants put in, and I had them for 6 years. And over the course of that 6 years, my health went from being, okay, I've kind of reached a peak at a healthy weight and everything's going really well. And then suddenly things started to really unravel. And basically, I was able to get them removed in the summer of 2020, which was a very interesting time to be going under any surgery.
Yeah.
You can imagine. But yeah, it has been quite the journey. So that's kind of some of the major pieces of kind of what happened and how I really ended up getting so into holistic wellness. It was honestly because I went through a lot of stuff and was honestly quite sick for a very long time and really didn't have any answers. A lot of it did end up coming to be as a result of the implants. I found out from the surgeon who removed them that I had been carrying a bacterial infection for the entire 6 years. So that was one thing. And then the other thing is many women do have, unfortunately, a lot of side effects, even if their implants are not recalled. Mine were actually one of the ones that were recalled. So that's a whole different, that's a whole thing.
Oh my gosh. Like
But it's
that's
kind of
wow, what a
wild.
journey.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. And I will have to say now that I'm kind of coming out of the healing process, although I guess we're probably never really out of the healing process, but at a different level, it's definitely been an enlightening experience is the best way I can say it. And I will tell you this, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it hadn't been for all of those years and all of those really difficult lessons that I learned about my health, about my own, perspective of myself, my belief in my potential, and all of these things. It definitely, I wouldn't be here talking to you today if I hadn't been through the thick of it, so to speak. So from that aspect, I'm forever grateful for every hardship that I faced. because
Oh, absolutely. Right. Do we, these journeys that we, I think, are gifted, right? Because that is these hardships that are the ones that are for us to endure are often because it's really, that's our purpose, is to support the people who are all then going through similar things after us to really actually change the world.
yeah, absolutely. Can really echo that 100%. And I wouldn't change a thing. I would literally not change 1 minute of it because I am so obsessed with the work that I get to do today and all of the knowledge that I get to share and just the support that I'm able to provide as a result of having kind of learned things the hard way, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So many questions through the whole, like what you were, when you're telling your story, I'm like, oh, I want to ask that. I want to ask that. So let's see if I can go all the way back first to, so I was, as I'm listening to you, I actually had a similar sort of weight gain, weight loss story. Yours was a little bit more magnitude than mine, but I was thinking and like dropped right back into the experience of when I pre being diagnosed with a thyroid disorder, I was gaining a pound a day. So my first thought was, as we're going through that process of literally gaining 90 pounds, how just the pain as a woman that you're enduring when you can't figure out what is going on, and then to then potentially figure out what's going on and have it just kind of all kind of melt away. The identity and the sort of um, it's like this trust, right? Like your body betrayed you. And then not only you feel like you can't necessarily trust your body, but then you also feel like you can't necessarily trust yourself, right? Because there's all of these like deep rooted things between, because you had programmed your mind to think potentially it was your fault, things that you were eating, things that you were doing, all of these things were the cause of it. And so then, even though now you know it was the birth control pill that was driving that, your mind doesn't necessarily connect to that association.
Right.
So what was that like for you and how did you deal with it?
I think that it was honestly probably the hardest thing that I've ever been through was just living in a body that didn't feel like my own. It also, at the same time, going back to think about what my perspective was at that time before I really had made any connections about a cause. Of course, I blamed myself. I actually, ironically, I blamed my genes because I actually have, well, I will tell you for reference, my brother is 6'7". I come from a line of really, big boned people. And so many of the people in my family, especially women, are like larger and larger bodies. And that's honestly, I think at that time in my life, in my early to mid 20s, I thought, oh, well, this is just how it's going to be, because I had seen other people older than me and generations, and cousins and things like that, that kind of represented that belief or presented that belief to me. And so there was a big part of me that said, oh, well, it doesn't matter what I do. It's not worth trying to fight. If this is inevitable, then, we might as well just learn how to feel good about ourselves and do the best we can in this body. And I really operated under that belief system for a very long time. And I think that, I can see both sides. There's some beauty in that. There's a lot of beauty in accepting what is. And at the same time, I am so grateful that I had the wake up call to understand that, hey, this is not what you need to be doing. This is not the lifestyle that you need to be living. Because the thing is, in my case, it was not just the birth control. Like that was kind of the catalyst, right? But I was not feeding myself well. I was not moving my body. I was not taking care of me. I was definitely not doing any sort of mindset work, or hadn't even crossed my mind yet. I was like fresh out of college and going through life as it starts to unfold and all that entails. So to me, the wake up call really happened when I started to understand, hey, this is not really the way that you want to live. And there are things that are within your control. And if you can learn how to prioritize yourself differently, you're going to feel better. And it really wasn't, at the end of the day, it wasn't so much about the weight. It wasn't so much about like trying to shrink myself or be in a smaller body or anything like that. I started to make some really radical changes because I knew that my health was already going to be in a rapid decline at the age of like 20. I was like 27 at the time when I really started to make some big changes. I'm like, hey girl, you can't live off fast food and beer, like this is not okay. And at the same time, I will say, I knew that there was something more that I needed to be doing. And I had no clue what, but I had a very, very, very strong drive that I was going to do something that meant a lot to me anyways. I knew that I had a calling, and I knew that the things that I were doing, A, wasn't it, and B, wasn't going to lead me down the path of finding whatever my potential was, or fulfilling, whatever my mission here is on earth. So it's very interesting. And actually, I'll share with you, I had kind of this epiphany moment one day that was a huge catalyst. And it was kind of this big God moment. And it was probably like one of the biggest, earliest kind of, I call it a wake-up call, because I feel like that's really what it was. And it was very much like this, like kind of bone shaking thing of like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And what do you want to be doing instead? And like, don't you believe that you're made for more? Don't you believe that there's something here that you need to step into? And so things were very easy for me after that moment, because it was like this really moving experience that I had. Literally one day I woke up from a nap and I was kind of in a semi state of trance, and all about that. And so I kind of literally woke up and was like, whoa, what just happened? It was like I heard this voice, and it was like, get it together.
Wow.
Yeah.
What I love about that is that it didn't have to be like a rock bottom moment for that, because a lot of times that's when that comes through for people, right? Is that it's this, you are actually at rock bottom, but this was not that way. You literally just heard the voice that was like, it's time to do something bigger. It's time to step into, into your power here and do the thing that you were meant to do. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I, I love that it was also so impactful that you were like aware, because I feel like sometimes those sorts of things could happen in someone's life, but yet they're not aware enough to have received it. They just think, oh, it was kind of a dream, and that would chalk it up to that, not as this this like delineating moment that was like, okay, today everything gets to be different.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it was very powerful. And I will tell you, I'm very fortunate to have kind of answered the call, so to speak, because had been many, many failed attempts prior to this at making lifestyle changes, at taking better care of myself, or trying, at least making some efforts, and not just kind of giving up and accepting some other fate, right? But I truly tell you with 100% transparency, from that day on, it was like, oh, we're on a mission. And it didn't feel the same anymore. It was like, I'm doing this for a reason. And the reason is not because I don't like myself. The reason is because I want to go into a place and a life that is bigger than what I can even really foresee.
Oh, it was a moment of literally finding your purpose, which is huge. I love that. It's a beautiful moment, a beautiful story. So, okay, fast forward then to going through the breast implants and like the feelings and things, the signs that it was time to let them go. What was that like? What were you experiencing? For anybody out there who's listening, thinking, is this what's going on in my body? What was it like for you?
Yeah, it was really a very tough decision, but not even from the point of like feeling like I was giving something up, or that I wouldn't be happy with my body on the other side of it. It was just this feeling of unknowing, and really like, is this the thing that is going to help me feel better? And it's a very ambiguous case for many women who are experiencing complications, because it shows up differently in every person's body. And a lot of that actually has to do with genetics. So it was just kind of a very windy journey. I had a very short-lived time in my new, fresh, shiny body that felt really good. And probably Man, I would say probably within a year, if not less, I started to notice some different things happening with my health, that really just felt like, again, kind of ambiguous, kind of low grade, like just not having a lot of energy. My brain was not working the same. So like the brain fog was like a very big part for me. I was having a lot of hormonal fluctuations, even a lot of like digestive stuff going on. It's really interesting. Almost to the day, a year after I had the surgery for the implants, I was in the emergency room having my gallbladder removed.
Mhm.
And it was very strange. Like I had never had any history of issues or anything like that. And I was only, was it at that point, I think 29 or 30 years old. So really weird stuff started to happen. And then a lot of different complications after that. So after removing an organ, and I really didn't have a lot of great guidance or support through that, or I didn't know what to do to live without a gallbladder. And I didn't know a fraction of what I know now about digestion or really just the human body and general function. So I was on my own, and that ended up, I was struggling with digestion for a very long time, and it was kind of snowballing, which when the digestion is not happy, a lot of things will start to kind of cascade from there. And it's like the first domino, so to speak.
Mm.
So yeah, I think by the time, well, I remember the day that I got the letter from Allergan that they had been recalled. It was kind of the sign, I think, that I had been like somewhat waiting on. It was very interesting because the letter that they sent out went to my old address, which was in New Orleans at the time. And I would have never gotten the letter otherwise because I hadn't lived there in years. But actually, my best friend lives in my old home in New Orleans. And so he received the piece of mail and was like, hey, you got something in the mail. This looks kind of important. And that like gut feeling of like, oh, great, here we go. Um, so yeah, I got the notice that they had been recalled. And that was kind of the confirmation that I needed, that like, hey, even if this doesn't solve all of my problems, even if removing these implants doesn't 100% cure me overnight, which some people do experience that, I did not. Even if it didn't, I knew that it was the right move.
Yeah.
Especially at that point, I had actually started studying nutrition, actually like starting closer to when I went through all of the weight loss. I started to get really fascinated by what was going on in my body and the changes that were happening, mostly the improvements. And so I started studying nutrition many years ago. And that kind of parlayed into now the genetics piece, which came a bit later. Actually, the in-between was the really fun part, though. That's when I got into the NLP and hypnosis and all of the things. I got a Kundalini yoga certification. And so that was kind of my, intro into the world of breathwork, actually. So
Mm.
started to really evolve quite rapidly, as you can imagine, with all of those modalities. So
Does.
honestly, I think through that journey, I think that by the time I was ready to have them out, I was like, let's just freaking go, like, let's just, whatever happens on the other side of this, we're good. There can't possibly be a mistake, or like, there can't possibly be anything that I can't handle on the other side of this.
Right? Oh my gosh. And I feel like the human body is such an amazing, amazing thing. And I feel like the female human body is such an amazing thing, so resilient. It's just continues to blow my mind on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So you've gone through all of these things, different health things go along the way, and then you dive into genetics, which kind of brings us kind of to where we are today, but not exactly, because I'm sure that was just like the beginning. So let's talk about genetics, how you got into it, how that translated into really what you do today, and how you help people really know their own blueprints from their genetics and what they can do on an individual customized basis to have optimal health.
Yeah. Well, actually, I will tell you, I kind of came into the world of epigenetics, or I was introduced to the term through the spiritual world. And, like Dr. Joe Dispenza was like, I was the biggest fangirl, and Bruce Lipton, and all of these people who had really amazing perspectives and even science behind some of the magic of mindset and the power of mindset. And so that was honestly like the world that I was living in. I was doing mindset coaching, and I really hadn't done a lot with my nutrition certifications. I was really just kind of like educating myself and really still trying to navigate my own journey. But it wasn't something that I ever really did with clients, because I will tell you, all of the trainings that I would do for nutrition, many of them were very conflicting. It's such a wild world in wellness, because everyone has a perspective and they're very convincing, right? So one camp is going to tell you, oh, you should eat all the protein in the world and you're going to feel amazing. And the other side is going to tell you, no way, you should eat only plants and only this certain type of plants or something like that, So there's a lot of opposition. And actually, when I found out that there was a literal like clinical grade test that you could do that would cut through all of the perspectives and opinions and really just show you quite transparently, this is actually what works for you, I was like, sign me up, I am in. This is the thing. And it was like a full body, oh my God, like this is the thing. And so I immediately dove really deep into the training and started getting as much practice as I possibly could. I will tell you, of course, I was my own first client. So as we're learning how to go through the process, it's a very lengthy process that we use. And the testing that I use is the actual largest array of genes that you can get. So it's a bit beyond anything that's consumer facing. So your smaller tests that are more mainstream, it's a similar concept, but here's the thing, like the more genes that you're looking at and the way that you're interpreting them leaves a lot on the table. So that's a whole tangent on like the automated testing, and I can talk more about why I don't consider that usually a good idea or direction. But what we're doing is very in-depth. And so I got to sit down with my own report first, right? And literally solved pretty much 100% of all of the problems, if you will, or all of the issues that I had that no one had been able to solve thus far. So I had seen countless functional medicine doctors, like some of the best in Los Angeles. I had done every test on the planet, and literally no one could tell me why my digestion was still a wreck after everything that I was doing, like really perfectly and all of these things. And anyway, very long story short, I solved all of my problems in literally one sitting. It was like full face crying, to tell you the truth, because I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, this is the answers were like right here the whole time. But it's just, it's a technology that it's coming around. It's coming around very quickly, but it's not mainstream yet, And so the fact that I had some genetic preferences that were kind of choosing the course of my body's path, no one had ever even mentioned the thought of it to me.
Okay, so this blows my mind, because I feel like we kind of dance in the same world here of that, you're looking for different answers and solutions a lot of times, not in the places where everyone else is looking for them. So a couple questions come up, which is like, first of all, maybe you don't have to answer this, but it's like, how could this not be mainstream? But since it's not mainstream, how did you come to find it first? Because I always feel like that's a question where people are like, well, when you don't know where to look, or like if you're looking in all the places that everybody tells you to look for things, how do you know where to look for stuff that's kind of like off the beaten path?
Yeah, honestly, it came to me very serendipitously. A friend of a friend, literally, a chance meeting. I was actually in one of my girlfriend's weddings, and like literally one of the other bridesmaids, who I literally thought I would never see again. We spent a weekend together at the wedding, and we talked very briefly about what I do. And at the time, again, I was really doing mindset coaching. And I get a call about a week after the wedding from the bride. And she was like, hey, remember Anna from the wedding? She told me she wanted to mention something to you, or she had something you might be interested in. And never did I think it would pan out to be something completely life-changing. But yeah, she had a friend who worked for the company in the training department, and they were kind of just starting their certification process. And so long story short, by the end of the week, I was on the phone with the friend of a friend of a friend and was like freaking out about, oh my God, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard of. So yeah, really wild. So I think it was just meant to find me, you know?
Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, so you go through, you do the testing, now you have all the answers, right? And you start implementing them. So what sort of changes happened for you, and like how quickly did they happen for you?
Oh my God. Okay. So literally within probably 3 days, I started to feel noticeable shifts. So basically, a lot of the functional practitioners that I was working with on gut healing had me on the wrong supplements. They had me on some very popular supplements that were not fit for my genes. They were literally making things worse. So as soon as I understood, chemically what sits well for me, because basically in your genes, you can see how your body responds to about a million things. You can see the goods, the bads, the uglies, the neutrals. You can truly see like whatever you're putting in, how's it going to work out in a nutshell. So literally, as soon as I was able to take out the wrong supplements that they had me on, add in some that were better suited, it was almost overnight.
Wow.
Which is honestly like not the case for everyone. So I get it, but it's not uncommon for people to have a similar experience to mine, where like within days, my digestion started to calm down, my brain fog started to lift. I felt like I was getting myself back. My personality was starting to feel like myself again in ways that you almost just can't articulate because it's chemical, you know?
Oh my gosh, so powerful. I
Yeah.
know many people are listening, they're like, oh my gosh, I need to know more about this.
Yeah.
So now, fast forward, you really do all of this kind of testing for the people that come into your world, your clients. What does that like? What does that look like? If someone's like, oh, I'm kind of interested. What does that journey look like?
I will tell you probably 80% of my business is just with a one-time reading. And I work with primarily women, but honestly, eventually they end up usually doing readings for their partners or for their kids or family kind of things. But mostly I work with women who have some confusing things going on. And I would say this, the majority of the time, just getting the right information and like a little bit of direction, most people can self-implement, because honestly, what we're looking at or what I'm looking at, these are not like rare genetic diseases or anything like that. That's not what I do. I'm doing like lifestyle optimization. So I can literally go through, okay, what are you taking? What are you eating? Those sorts of things. What exactly is going on in your day to day? And we just slightly can tweak things, but it's kind of like one of those things where it's like a master key, right? So like when it fits, it unlocks literally everything. So we look at markers for nutrition, for supplementation, for sleep, exercise, hormones. So you're getting like this entire blueprint of everything. So when you're working with this big of a spectrum, so compared to doing, say, like just a microbiome test or just hormone testing or things like that, you can see a lot more pieces of the puzzle. And so the picture becomes very clear what things are connected, because there are so many things that are not, well, nothing's really ever standalone, right? So when you can kind of roll out this big blueprint, things can happen very quickly because you're moving kind of from the foundation, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it's kind of like truly holistic when you actually start to look at it from that standpoint, because you're looking from an entire bird's eye view.
Totally. Well, and we can also see certain things like, a person's sensitivity to stress. So this helps me to really see it, well, put it in kind of a tangible format for a client who might need a little encouragement on working on their self-care or their stress management,
Yeah.
or, adding in things like breath work that they may not have ever even heard of before. We actually have a whole panel for nitric oxide, which is amazing. And it's actually like quite common that people need extra amounts of nitric oxide. So if they're doing nasal breath work, it's literally the fastest way to increase your nitric oxide. So we get to have a lot of fun conversations and essentially kind of tailor a lifestyle plan that feels really good. It's going to be the most effective thing that you've ever done because it's literally crafted for your body's chemistry. And it just makes you feel like you're doing the right things, like instead of just reading something online or hearing what someone else is doing and trying to like search for this magic solution. It's not really one thing. It doesn't really work like that.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like everybody needs to do this. Everybody needs to get in touch and do a
Well, I
reading.
definitely think so. I think it's one of those things where like, I do work with a lot of women who are having very complex concerns. And so it's priceless for them. But also I work with a lot of women who are just interested in maybe having their brain a little sharper or having a little bit more energy or really just prevention and longevity. So there's kind of something in it for everyone.
And who doesn't want, more longevity and
Totally.
energy?
Totally. And who doesn't want to streamline into really like proven things that are going to work? So
Absolutely. All the yes to that. Okay. So I'm so fascinated. We could sit here and probably like talk about this forever, but so it's a big undertaking that you've taken on, a big really mission, a big business that you're running. So I feel like inside of all of that, there has to have been at some point someone who's really just shown you that this was possible for you. So I'd love to super expand your story if you'd share that with me.
okay, this is kind of cheesy, but I'll go there. It's actually my dad. Like my dad has been the biggest inspo. So I'll tell you a little bit about us and about him. I grew up in a tiny, tiny, literally little one red light town in North Louisiana, which is also where he and my mom both grew up. They were high school sweethearts and moved away and came back. But my dad grew up as one of 11 children, and they were farmers, and he like worked in the field. He literally picked cotton by hand from the age of 5 years old. And as you can imagine, being one of 11 kids, there was no college fund. So he put himself through college and law school. And for my entire life, he was a judge. And it was just the coolest thing because it was a very unique path that he had and literally just carved his own way. Never took no for an answer, never listened to anyone who said that he can't or couldn't. And just truly loved the life that he created and also lived a very kind of humble, simple life. Like you would never know if you saw him on the street, you would probably never guess that he, had the path that he had. And just the coolest, most down to earth, loving, giving heart. So growing up with him being the judge of a tiny little town or the little area in rural Louisiana was very interesting. We always had people coming to knock on the door, ask for advice, like literally free legal advice would come knocking on our door at like Thanksgiving dinner. It was kind of like, there were times where it was like, you gotta be kidding me. But if it wasn't actually Thanksgiving Day, what I saw was probably the world's most patient man who would literally do anything to help anyone. And it was one of those things that just, you don't see that modeled very often, I think. And I feel just so fortunate that he's still in my life. And actually, I will tell you, he and my mom have been like my most star student clients. So after putting them through genetics coaching, they are actually in phenomenal health and doing great. And like he tells everyone about my work, and it's kind of cute. But yeah, he was honestly the biggest expander, seeing where he came from and what he was able to achieve, and also just kind of being able to follow his heart in a way, and the amount of just energy that he pours into his work and just such a giver was just always the coolest thing, or is still always the coolest thing.
Oh, I love that. I feel like what a gift for that to have been, for that to have been your dad, for that to have been your parents, that to have been your childhood, because just I don't know, I could just feel the warmth and the expansion and how that, I don't know, it's going to give me chills.
Yeah, I feel very lucky. He's a very, very, very special man. And I mean, the lessons were just, man, I could go on and on, but yeah, I think that it would have to be him. He had a very high hat hung and some very big shoes to fill.
I also love that both of your parents are clients. That's the cutest and the best. And I mean, oh my gosh, just think about, the longevity that comes from them being your clients. That's, a full circle moment there for you.
Totally. Totally.
That's so special. Okay, so I know everyone that's listening is just completely blown away by the story. They're blown away by your work and they want to get into your world. So what's the best way for them to learn more about you, or, really just dive right in and sign up to get a reading?
Yeah, totally. I will say I'm probably most on Instagram. So you can find me on Instagram, but also my website has a ton of insights and some videos and some helpful things if you just want to understand a little bit more about the technology and see kind of the way that I work. I have a program called Body by Design. So basically you get a little bit of a mix. It's a hybrid one-on-one offering. So you get a one-on-one reading and the full analysis, and a long 2-hour session so that we go through all of the details if you feel confident moving forward. And then there's an entire program available for you. So we have trainings on things like sleep and stress management and you name it, hormones, all the things, as well as a community. So you have access to a group chat, you can ask questions. So it's really great for people who are interested in self-starting. You'll have literally everything you possibly need to really succeed and feel empowered.
Amazing. And I'll make sure all of that is in the show notes for ease. They can just click right on the link to get in to follow you on Instagram and to kind of learn more on your website. So if you had to leave everyone with just one more juicy nugget, there's been so many that you've already shared, but we're going to go for a bonus here. One more juicy nugget that you could share.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's that you're never broken. It is never too late. No matter what anyone tells you, there are always answers. There are always solutions. And just to keep looking for yourself, keep advocating for yourself, and keep searching. Keep believing that there's something possible, especially when there are things going on in your health that can feel very defeating, or whether it just feels like, hey, I've been dealt this hand of cards, or whatever the thing is. There's always a better. There is always something on the other side. And you never know. It may just be the thing that you look back and say, man, I am so, so grateful that I went through all of that sludge, because it's gotten me to this point. And things will always make sense. I think when you get to the other side, you can always kind of look back and say, oh, I get it.
Absolutely.
That's exactly why I was handed that assignment.
Yeah, I think that's what Steve Jobs says. You can't, or said that you can't connect the dots looking forward, right? It's always it's after the experience when you look back and you're like, oh, that happened because of that, and that's why I'm here, and now here we are. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing, or why I had to endure that sort of discomfort or pain that you went through. It was for a greater purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here today, for carving out the time to just share your wisdom, to share your light. I am forever grateful. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure.
We will catch you on the next episode.